All right, so we're here on another special Couch Coach Live. We got a special guest in the building. I got our guy, Jones Angel, the voice of Tar Heel football and basketball. What is going on, Jones?
Oh man, I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to talking little TarHeels today.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Very much so. So, before we get into our first, I want to talk about just how, like, your journey, basically, your journey, and then who has influenced you down this way.
You know, it's funny. I always tell young broadcasters to not try to do it the way that I did it, because the way that I did it is pretty unique. So I actually started working with the TarHeel Sports Network when I was in school at Carolina. So I graduated in 2001, which sadly it used to be a really short time ago. Now it's getting to be a long time ago. But while I was in school between my sophomore and junior year, I started interning with the network, and what that meant was really anything. You know, I could go get people lunch, I could be checking records in the media guide, I could be just hanging out. Sometimes I would just go down after class and just kind of be in the studio and be around, and I maybe wouldn't have anything to do, but I got to talk to people, I got to learn how to use equipment, and it was a really big benefit for me. And then just as time went along, I started doing different things. I shot camera. I helped edit the coach's TV show. I did women's soccer broadcast on the internet, like our first ever internet broadcast. It was just audio. I did that. And then just through some different circumstances, had the opportunity to be the play-by-play man for women's basketball and for baseball. I did women's basketball for 2 years. I did baseball for I think it was either 8 or 9. And then when Mick Nixon left, this was after the 2005 season. So the 04-05 season, Carolina, of course, as you know, won the national title that year in basketball. You know, Mick left to go to the Carolina Panthers, where he's still the play-by-play man. And when he left, that opened up a role for me. And so what I did is I moved into our football and men's basketball broadcast as what we call the host role. So I do our pregame, our halftime, our postgame, that kind of stuff. And then we filled in the analyst role with Eric Montross at the time, who still does the games with me now for basketball, and Rick Steinbacher, who did football at the time. And so that was so beneficial for me because to answer the second part of your question, I got to work directly next to Woody Durham, the longtime play-by-play voice of Carolina. Of course, Woody did it for 40 years. Unfortunately, we lost Woody just a couple of years ago after a battle with an illness. But those 6 years that I got to sit next to Woody were so incredibly beneficial for me as a young broadcaster. And I had worked with Woody. I knew him. He and I had done stuff together. But that's the first time I'd really gotten to sit next to him and see how it really worked. And I tell you, I remember the first game that we did where I was in that role. It was in Atlanta. Carolina was going to play Georgia Tech in football. And I went down there and I thought, you know what? I'm going to prepare for this broadcast like I'm doing the play-by-play. I wasn't, but I wanted to prepare that way just to kind of get used to that, and hopefully that would pay off in the long run. And so I felt really good, like I was super prepared. And then I sat down and I looked over, and Woody had more stuff in front of him than I could ever imagine. It looked like he was like going to fly a spaceship or something. He had so much information in front of him. And so that's when I really learned that everybody has talent at this point. If you're in the mix to call games at Carolina or for a pro team or whatever it might be, you can do the job talent-wise. It's that level of preparation that separates the ones who are good to the ones who are really good. And so, yeah, that was so beneficial for me to see all the preparation and all the hard work that went into Woody's stuff before you heard all the great stuff that he did on the air. And so, gosh, those were beneficial years for me, and I learned so much from Woody and from Mick, and I considered those guys friends and mentors. And like I said, unfortunately, we've lost Woody, but I speak to Mick at least once a month, and he and I talk all the frequently, just as friends and as colleagues. So I feel really lucky that happened. But like I mentioned, that's not a usual path. You don't usually start getting people drinks and then get to the point that you want to be doing what you're doing. So I was very lucky. Timing was a lot of it, just in the right place at the right time. And fortunately, some hard work really paid off too.
Absolutely. Wow, what a great story. Wait, like you said, it just start from the bottom and then you work your way up. It's
And for me, I grew up a Carolina fan, and I grew up listening to Woody and Mick on the radio, and so my dad and I we'd turn down the sound on the TV, we'd watch the game and listen to the radio broadcast because we wanted to hear the Carolina perspective. And so, when I first met those guys, it was like a rock star was in there with me because I had spent so many hours with them as a fan that I felt like I knew them and that I had a relationship with them. They didn't know me at all, but I felt like I knew them so well because of those many hours and all those games. And so it was a really fun thing for me to get a chance to then take that step to learn underneath them and learn from them. And they both really helped my career tremendously.
absolutely, absolutely. And we know Carolina is traditionally a basketball school, but looking now this year coming up, we have the Tar Heels ranked as the 18th team going to certain polls. Just your thoughts on this upcoming Tar Heel football season.
Well, number one, we hope we have it, right? We want to be able to play football, and if we're playing, that means it's safe to play. So that would be a good thing. We need to be able to play, and we need to be able to do it safely. So I know that's everybody's hope. Everybody continues to follow the guidelines. I know Carolina early when it had its student athletes start to stagger their return back to campus, had some problems with high numbers of positive tests. Fortunately, Mac Brown said last week his team hasn't had a positive test in, I believe it's 3 weeks. So that's great news. So number one, we hope to play. Number two, this could be a really exciting year for Carolina. This is a team that has so much talent coming back, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Starting with Sam Howell. I mean, with everything in football, it starts with the quarterback, and he made such a difference a season ago with his hard work, with his talent, with his arm talent, his ability to throw different places on the field. Really a tremendous first season. And then when you mix in the fact you've got two 1,000-yard receivers coming back, two 900-plus yard running backs coming back, there's just a lot of not just talent, but experienced talent for the Tar Heels right now on that offensive side of the ball. And I think they've really improved their depth. I'm just talking about the wide receivers. I think De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome are the first two you think about. But there's 6, 7, 8 guys that I think could see some time for Carolina this year because they have earned the right to have that time on the field. Flip it over to the defensive side. There are some bigger questions there, just needing to replace some talent, particularly up front with Aaron Crawford and Jason Strobridge both graduating. But man, there's some exciting players over there. Chaz Surratt, we all know what he did last year after making the switch from the quarterback to linebacker. Carolina's depth in the secondary has really improved. Some transfers have helped them there. Some really good recruiting has helped them there. So it's just an exciting time around Carolina football. So much positive energy, so much buzz. And it's because of Mac Brown. He and the staff that he's put together have done a terrific job in a short amount of time, improving what you see on the field, really improving the momentum in recruiting, and just getting a lot of positive feelings around the team. It's crazy to think, this was a 7-6 team last year. It's not like they were 12-1, but those 6 losses were by a combined 26 points. They didn't lose a game. 7 points was the largest loss they had a season ago. So just a really exciting time to be a Carolina football fan, and just another reason why I hope we can do this safely coming up in the fall.
Absolutely. And you did mention Sam Howell. So it's funny. I get mixed reviews with Sam, like as far as from national. To me, and maybe it's part of my bias, but I think he should be considered in the Heisman, in the Heisman conversation. At least have a seat at the table at the Heisman discussion. Your thoughts on the potential of him having a Heisman-like season?
Oh, TarHeels would love that, and it's great that he's even being kind of mentioned as a fringe candidate. I think here early in the year, you have to have team success to have that kind of individual success. They're not handing the Heisman Trophy to many teams that go 7-6. You're going to have a really special type of year, but Carolina feels like it is building towards that. And I think that's part of the excitement with Carolina is that you don't feel like this is just this season kind of thing. I think what you see with Mac Brown is that they're building for consistent success. So even though the setup will be different this year because of the change in the schedule, but Carolina wants to be a team that competes for the Coastal Division championship every year. If you win your division, you're going to the ACC championship. If you're playing for the ACC championship, you have a chance to have a success on a national level. And when that kind of stuff happens, that's when you start having those national type of awards that are possible, like a Heisman Trophy, like a Doak Walker, or whatever you want to say, for those individual positions. Now, is Sam good enough to do that? His numbers last year were incredible. You're looking at 35 plus touchdowns to just 7 interceptions. He was so good in that freshman season. And so if you believe that he will naturally improve, that he's going to improve his decision making, that maybe he doesn't take quite as many hits, just all those different things that Carolina needs him to do to get to improve from year one to year two. And if the Tar Heels have team success, then I think that's when you can start thinking about those major type of national awards.
Absolutely. And also to talk about the season as well, the football season. Do you think having just a conference only schedule helps versus we had Auburn on the schedule, which obviously Auburn wouldn't be on the schedule. So your thoughts on
Sure.
just having a conference only schedule this year?
Well, I think in the current climate, it makes sense because it just you can control it a little bit better if you're the ACC, and by that I mean two things. One, the geography of it. For example, Carolina was not originally scheduled to play Wake Forest this year, but when the schedule got reshuffled, they were, and that makes sense. Wake is going to come to Chapel Hill. That's a 90-minute bus ride. That makes a lot more sense than, say, Wake going to Boston College or something like that. Just with the current climate, you're trying to reduce spread. You're trying to reduce travel as much as you can. Now, having said that, Carolina still has road games at BC and at Miami, which are as far away as you can get in the league. But I know they tried to make it as geographic as possible with also keeping in mind previous games that were already scheduled as far as league opponents. The other part of that is, and more importantly, is you can control how each one of these schools mandates their testing and how frequently they're testing, how quickly they get those testing results back. The infrastructure of the teams in the league are relatively similar. That's not to say everybody's exactly the same, but they're relatively similar compared to if you're playing somebody, and I'm just going to pick a conference from the Sun Belt or something. They may not have the same type of resources, the same ability to get those tests, at not just the frequency, but the turnaround time as well. So having said all that, it makes sense to do it this way this season. Now, for the Tar Heels, they lost a couple of marquee out-of-conference games with Central Florida and Auburn in the first 2 weeks. Both those teams are in the preseason top 25, just like the Tar Heels are that you mentioned a little bit earlier. And so those are just tremendous opportunities to make a statement early on. If you go 2-0 in those games, or even 1-1 and play well in the loss, I think you get some early momentum, you get some national attention if you're Carolina. So losing those opportunities hurt. But I think for the Tar Heels, you just got to take what you get right now. You just want to be able to play right now, no matter how many games it is.
Absolutely. So how do you think the season's gonna play out?
Oh man, I wish I knew that answer. Number one, again, I just hope it does play out. But number two, for the Tar Heels right now, they're just worried about Syracuse. And even having said that, I'm not even sure that they're super worried about Syracuse right now. Right now, they're still worried about themselves. In fact, Carolina was scheduled this past weekend to have its first scrimmage of the training camp. That got put on hold because Carolina, as you know, paused all athletic opportunities, all athletic activities late last week and this weekend. Those have now resumed. So Carolina on Tuesday will have its first scrimmage. So they're still in that process of figuring themselves out, figuring that depth chart out a little bit, letting young guys get extra reps so they can see where they are in their development. As they get a little closer to September the 12th, then you'll start seeing Carolina, I think, worry about Syracuse a little bit more. The Tar Heels do have a couple of really fun games on that schedule if it plays out the way they hope it does. Notre Dame coming to Chapel Hill, Carolina going to Miami. In fact, those are the last two games of the regular season. Those could be mammoth games if the year plays out the way that it looks like it might on paper. So it's an exciting time. Carolina would have a good team. And again, you just hope that they can be on the field.
Yeah, and hopefully we will, and I'm definitely we're knocking on wood. We're doing everything we can to keep the season going. Yeah. So let's talk about TarHeel hoops. What went wrong last year?
A lot of things, unfortunately, I think went wrong for Carolina. I think last year was going to be a bit of a transition year anyway for Carolina, even if things had gone perfectly. I think it was going to be a bit of a transition year for the Tarheels anyway. And I hate to use this because it sounds like an excuse, but I do think injuries just played an enormous role this season ago. Of course, Cole Anthony's was the one that was most prominent, but it seemed like Carolina so rarely had its entire team together and able to practice on a consistent basis with that same group for a long period of time. So not only did you have the Anthony injury, Leaky Black missed some time, Andrew Platek missed some time, Sterling Manley did not play at all last season for Carolina. Garrison Brooks missed a game. So, I mean, you just had that in and out of guys, Brandon